G'day guys, and today it's once again time to hold the Australian media to account. So a big story that's recently broken in Australia is that there's this secret phone call between Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison. And essentially what was agreed in this phone call is that Australia will be helping out the US in its investigation of the Mueller probe. So looking at the origins of the Mueller probe and where it came from and that sort of thing. And that's been carried out by William Barr. Now, I'm not so much interested in the story itself. That's an issue for other people to talk about. I view it as pretty cut and dry. Australia is just helping out its ally. What interests me is the media's treatment of this story, and subsequently the Mueller probe story, because what was happening for the last years that the Mueller probe has been running is that the Australian media has engaged in a vast campaign of lying by omission. Now, what lying by omission is that when you report a story, you just leave out certain elements that would contradict your story or make it flimsy and that sort of thing. And this is what you're going to see if you go and look up stories relating to this conversation now, or any other story relating to the Mueller probe and how it ended and the results of it and that sort of thing. What you'll see is something like Donald Trump calls the probe a hoax or a witch hunt, and that's always in quotations to sort of make that, make him look ridiculous and make it seem like, that's not what it actually is. It's just what he says rather than objective fact. And something else you will see is that a very quick summary of the report, which will be like, the Mueller probe failed to find any wrongdoing by the Trump campaign, but it failed to exonerate him on obstruction of justice. Now, that is lie by omission. That is a true statement. The probe did indeed fail to find any wrongdoing by the Trump campaign, but what this fails to mention is the vast swathe of corruption and mishandling of the case that was performed by partisan FBI agents. I'll run you through it here. What was told to the American public and by extension the world is that there was some evidence that indicated that there were links between the Trump 2016 presidential campaign and Russia. And obviously this is very concerning because obviously we don't want foreign powers influencing elections. Just by the by, foreign powers always influence elections. It happens every single year, but it's only a problem when Trump's involved, I suppose. So that's what we're told. There's evidence, or we think that there's evidence. Where there's smoke, there's fire. We're going to go looking for it. What we eventually found out was that the sole piece of evidence that triggered the Mueller probe was an opposition research campaign funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign. So that's where the Steele dossier comes from. And now, as you probably know, the Steele dossier had some very strange things in it. Trump comparing Obama to shits in the toilet, getting hookers to pee on Obama's bed, and all this weird and crazy stuff. And as far as I'm aware, the information collected from the Steele dossier was third-hand information. So Christopher Steele, former MI6 agent, goes over and he talks to people who get him information. So third-hand information from a person to another person to another person, and then that was then fronted to the FBI as concerning evidence that Trump might be influenced by the Russians. And I suppose what happened is partisan FBI agents who did not like Trump, people like Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, according to their text messages, something that came out very early on after Trump's victory was the contingency plan that these two FBI agents mentioned, and people were very concerned about that, and you got to call a conspiracy theorist if you were at all concerned about that. So obviously people like Lisa Page and Peter Strzok would have got hold of this information, decided that it was juicy and it could either impeach Trump or at least hang it over his head for the next couple of years to sort of stall him out as a president. This information was then handed over to the FISA court. Now what the FISA court does is authorize basically the violation of the Fourth Amendment in the United States. It's a spying tribunal, essentially. You say, can I spy on this person? Yes or no? And I believe over 99% of the time they say yes. So it's certainly, as people have been saying, a rubber stamping organization. So this information was passed over to the FISA court system. They obviously rubber stamped it. It was then passed over to Rosenstein, who claims in a sort of fence-sitting position that he can't even recall if he even read what was in the paper or the report. So again, that's just to save his own skin, because if he read what's in the report and it's obviously bullshit, then he could get in trouble. But if he didn't read what's in it, then he could get in trouble. So he's on this fence-sitting position. Good on him. But the important thing to recall is that it was this one solitary piece of evidence that triggered the FISA probe and the Mueller investigation. Now that is something that is never ever mentioned in the Australian media. I've never seen that mentioned in the Australian media, and I do at least some reading into the mainstream media, obviously trying to get a feel for reporting, trying to look up news. But when I want to get news on certain things, and especially the Mueller probe and Trump and that sort of thing, I can't go to the Australian mainstream media because they're just going to lie to me. And this is exactly what you're seeing here. There's been, several minutes of information here that they've completely discarded from their articles. Again, talking about how it was a solitary piece of information, a piece of opposition research, how it was handed over to the FBI, and how that was handed over to the FISA court, which is a rubber stamping organization, I should say. So it's no wonder that the probe was triggered. But that's not the sort of thing you're going to hear from the Australian media, which is absolutely tragic, because obviously a lot of people trust these groups and organizations to deliver them news, and, well, they're not giving you news. They're giving you what you want to hear or what they think you should hear. And this is especially a big problem in Australia when we have the Australian Broadcasting Committee, the ABC, which is a government-funded organisation. That's terrible beyond words. There should be no government-owned or co-opted or funding in any kind of media. That's despicable. That's just a straight, fast-ticket highway to corruption, but again, that's a topic for another day. So that's really what I wanted to bring your attention to today. Not necessarily the story itself, in that Australia has agreed to investigate the investigation, so to speak, have a look into the Mueller probe and have a look at its origins and things like that. No, what I'm more concerned about bringing to people's attention is the lying by omission, the deception performed by the Australian media in their reporting of this story and stories like it relating to Trump, relating to the Mueller probe. You're not getting the full picture with the Australian media, not at all. And again, that's a shame, because it means people like me who already have full-time jobs have to take time out of our day to ensure that people are getting the full picture, because you're not getting the full picture if you consume Australian media. So yes, like most other people on the platform, I encourage you all watching today to support people like me and others. Support independent media, true independent media, not newspapers like the Sydney Morning Herald that just claim they're independent whilst running ads and having editors and being owned by a parent company and that sort of thing. That's not independence whatsoever. No one can tell me and people like me what to say. I don't have sponsors. I don't have editors. I literally just sit down with my microphone and talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about. Obviously, I'm going to talk about things that I think are important, such as the journalistic standards of the Australian media and their lies by omission. I also encourage everyone watching to get on old tech or jump on YouTube as it potentially slides into oblivion, as it continues to piss off the people that made it so great. I encourage everyone to get on these platforms and start making your own independent content, because we really need to defend free speech online. We really need to defend the independent citizen journalism that is taking place across the world in increasing numbers and with increasing popularity, despite all the censorship that is happening, both transverse and top-down through governments and corporations and that sort of thing. Because it is so important for us to get the full picture, because we're not going to get the full picture with these establishment media outlets. So that's about it. Jump on YouTube, jump on Bitchute, start making content. You can either endure a little bit of ignominy now, a bit of fuck ups and people calling you rude names and this sort of thing, and maybe some ostracism from your friends, or you can endure the absolute contempt you will have for yourself when you look back in your life and realize you could have done something. You could have defended free speech online, you could have defended independent journalism, and you chose not to because of reasons that will seem so trivial in the future. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of the ostracism of my friends. I can defend what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is very important, and I think you should be able to too. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.